The air inside the airplane cabin was tense, thick with the hum of restless passengers and the faint creak of overhead bins. But something explosive, was about to shatter the uneasy calm. At seat 5A, Nia sat quietly, clutching the worn strap of her backpack. She was 17, sharp-witted, and on her way to visit family for the summer. This was supposed to be just another flight, another journey, another chance to sit by the window and watch the clouds float by. But then came the sharp voice, a voice that sliced through the bustle like a knife. "Miss, you are not in the right seat. Move to the back with the rest of the passengers." Nia glanced up, startled. The flight attendant's eyes burned with an anger that didn't make sense. "Excuse me?" Nia said calmly, holding up her boarding pass. "This is my seat." "Not on my flight," the attendant snapped, leaning in closer, her tone rising. "You have no right to be here." Passengers began to murmur, heads turning. The cabin fell into a heavy silence, but the tension crackled louder than the roaring engines. Nia's hands tightened around her bag strap, her mind racing. She had a valid ticket for first class. She had all her documents. Yet here she was, being treated like an intruder, being singled out in front of dozens of eyes. "Please," Nia said evenly. "I'm sitting where I'm supposed to." But reason fell on deaf ears. The flight attendant's voice grew louder, and not just louder, crueler, more humiliating. "You don't belong here. Go where you're told." Nia's heart thundered painfully, but her voice was steady. "I'm not moving." The murmurs shifted to whispers, whispers to gasps. Some passengers looked away, uncomfortable. Others stared. Some reached for their phones. Nia knew this wasn't just about a seat. It was about something deeper, something ugly. Her fingers found her phone in her pocket. With trembling resolve, she dialed a number, the one person she knew could cut through this nightmare, her father. Waiting for the call to connect, Nia could feel the eyes of the cabin on her, some skeptical, others supportive, a few hostile. The flight attendant stalked nearby, glaring. Then something remarkable happened. The plane's captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be delaying our departure due to an ongoing situation. We ask for your patience and cooperation." Nia's finger hovered over the screen, ready to speak. Outside, crew members whispered into radios, and footsteps approached. In that moment, Nia realized that sometimes one call could change everything. That's the end of part 1. The story captures the shock and tension of the moment the black teen girl was shouted at and made the call that resulted in the plane grounding. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as murmurs rippled through the passengers. Some pulled out their phones, others whispered, anxiously. Nia's heartbeat seemed to reverberate with the uncertain tension in the air. Her call connected. "Hey, Dad. It's me," she whispered into the phone, the hum of the plane behind her. "There's a problem. A big problem." Her father's steady voice came through. "What's going on?" Nia took a breath, steadying herself. "The flight attendant. She's accusing me of being in the wrong seat. She's yelling at me in front of everyone. They don't believe me that I have a first-class ticket." There was silence on the other end. Then, finally, "I'm on it. Stay calm and stay put. Don't let anyone push you around." Nia felt a flicker of reassurance, but the anger and humiliation she felt simmered just below the surface. Across the aisle, the flight attendant's sharp gaze locked onto Nia's. She marched down the aisle and whispered something into the headset. Moments later, a tall man in a uniform appeared, a representative from the airline. "Ma'am," he said, his voice firm but polite. "Let's step aside and discuss this." Passengers craned their necks as Nia followed the man to a small galley near the rear of the plane. The flight attendant stood nearby, arms crossed, her face flushed with irritation. Nia pulled out her boarding pass again, holding it steady. "I am in the right seat," she said quietly. "I have a valid ticket." The man sifted through his tablet, his expression shifting as he checked the records. Then his eyes met hers. "Ms. Johnson, you are correct. This seat is assigned to you." Relief washed over Nia, but so did a surge of frustration. Back in the cabin, the captain's voice returned through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, We appreciate your patience as this matter is resolved. Thank you for understanding. Suddenly, the airplane felt like a courtroom, every passenger on edge, witnessing a confrontation that was never meant to be public. Nia's father's voice came through again on her phone. You did the right thing. Don't let them make you feel less than you are. We'll handle this. The sense of injustice lingered, but so did one undeniable truth. Sometimes, speaking up, making that one call, could stop an injustice in its tracks. The tension in the cabin was palpable as Nia stood in the galley, her heart racing. The flight attendant's face twisted in disbelief, her authority challenged in front of the entire plane. Nia could feel the weight of the passengers' stares, some sympathetic, others judgmental. Ms. Johnson, the airline representative said, his voice steady. I apologize for the confusion. It seems there was a mix-up with the seating assignments. You are indeed in the correct seat. He turned to the flight attendant, who was still fuming. I suggest we resolve this matter quickly, to avoid further disruption. The flight attendant's eyes narrowed. This is unacceptable. She shouldn't be in first class. It's not right. Nia's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean it's not right? She shot back, her voice rising. I paid for this ticket just like everyone else. Why does it matter to you? The AOA representative raised a hand, trying to maintain peace. Let's not escalate this further. Ms. Johnson, would you like to return to your seat? Or would you prefer to speak with a supervisor once we land? Nia hesitated, glancing back at the passengers. She could see a few nodding in support, while others looked away, uncomfortable. I want to stay in my seat, she said firmly. I'm not going to let her push me around. Very well, the representative said, his tone diplomatic. I'll ensure that you are not disturbed again. Thank you for your patience. As Nia returned to her seat, she felt a mix of triumph and anger. The flight attendant shot her a glare as she passed, but Nia held her head high. She had stood her ground, and that felt powerful. Once seated, she pulled out her phone again, her fingers trembling as she texted her father. I stood up for myself. They're letting me stay in first class. A moment later, her phone buzzed with a reply. I'm proud of you. Just remember this isn't over. We'll talk when you land. The plane began to taxi down the runway, and Nia felt a wave of relief wash over her. But as the engines roared to life, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. As the plane ascended into the sky, the flight attendant returned to her duties, but her demeanor had changed. She avoided eye contact with Nia, but the tension lingered like a storm cloud. Nia glanced around the cabin, noticing the reactions of the other passengers. Some were engrossed in their screens, while others whispered among themselves. A few had even taken out their phones to record the incident. Suddenly, a woman seated a few rows back stood up. Excuse me, she called out, her voice cutting through the hum of the engines. I just want to say that what happened back there was completely out of line. No one should be treated that way, especially not a young girl. Nia's heart swelled with gratitude. The woman continued. We all deserve respect, regardless of our skin color or age. I hope the airline takes this seriously. The cabin erupted in murmurs of agreement. Nia felt a rush of support, a wave of solidarity that made her feel less alone. The flight attendant, visibly flustered, tried to regain control. Thank you for your input, ma'am. But we need to keep the aisles clear. Please take your seat. But the woman stood her ground. I will not sit down until this is addressed. This is not just about a seat. It's about how we treat each other. Nia's heart raced. She had never expected this kind of support, especially from strangers. It was a reminder that her voice mattered, that standing up against injustice could inspire others to do the same. As the flight continued, Nia found herself reflecting on the events of the day. She had always been the quiet one, the one who avoided confrontation. But today, she had found her voice. She had made a call that changed everything, not just for herself, but for others as well. The flight attendant returned to her duties, but the atmosphere had shifted. Passengers were now more aware, more engaged. Conversations sparked up around the cabin, and Nia could hear snippets of discussions about equality, respect, and the importance of standing up for what's right. As the plane soared above the clouds, Nia felt a sense of empowerment wash over her. The announcement from the cockpit echoed through the cabin a second time. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to an ongoing situation, we will be returning to the gate for further investigation. We apologize for the inconvenience." A wave of murmurs swept across the passengers. Phones were out, cameras ready. Some had already started streaming the event that had unfolded seconds ago. Nia felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and resolve. She had known the stakes were high, but she hadn't imagined that one-seat dispute would become a storm grounded at the very airport that morning. As the plane edged backward on the runway, the murmurs grew louder, passengers speculating, some expressing outrage on Nia's behalf, others defending the flight attendant, reflecting the polarized reality of such incidents in the modern world. She could feel eyes on her. Solidarity, curiosity, and even thinly veiled hostility. But Nia held her head high. Every whisper in the cabin was a reminder that her small act had sparked a dialogue. That sometimes courage is contagious. At the gate, the plane came to a halt, and several uniformed airport security personnel boarded swiftly, accompanied by an airline supervisor whose expression bore the weight of having to manage a crisis not of his own making. The attendant who had yelled earlier was pulled aside, her face stoic but visibly shaken. The supervisor approached Nia, offering a polite but firm tone. "Ms. Johnson, due to recent events, we need to escort you off the aircraft for further discussion." Nia's heart thundered, but she nodded. She understood the necessity to clarify details and, more importantly, to address the public record. As she stepped down the jet bridge, a wall of reporters and onlookers surrounded the terminal. She was suddenly thrust into a spotlight she hadn't sought but could no longer avoid. Her father had arrived quietly, positioning himself to shield her from the flashing cameras. His hand clasped hers tightly. A reporter's voice pierced the chaos. "Miss Johnson, will you comment on the incident aboard Flight 274? Nia took a deep breath and faced the crowd. "I stood up for my right to be treated fairly," she said, voice clear and unwavering. "No one should be made to feel less because of their skin color or age. I hope this experience sparks change." Her statement was met with a mix of applause and murmurs, some supportive, some skeptical. Back inside, airline officials escorted Nia and her father to a private room. The supervisor looked apologetic. "We deeply regret the disruption and apologize for how you were treated. We're launching a full investigation." Nia nodded, feeling a mixture of vindication and weariness. As the hours passed, social media exploded. The hashtag #StandWithNia trended worldwide, videos of the confrontation broadcast and dissected. What began as a tense moment on a plane had become a catalyst for a broader conversation. Nia realized then that the call she made, the courage she had mustered, had not just grounded a plane, it had ignited a movement. But there was still much ahead. The fight for justice, healing, and a better world. The days that followed were a whirlwind. What had begun as a tense confrontation inside Flight 274 swiftly escalated into a national conversation about discrimination, power, and justice. News outlets picked up the story. Social media conversations surged with voices demanding accountability. For Nia Johnson, a 17-year-old high school student, life had changed irreversibly. After the incident, the airline had placed the flight attendant on administrative leave, pending an investigation. The airline's CEO issued a public apology, promising to review company policies and provide bias training. But unlike many corporate apologies, this one felt different, partly because of the undeniable evidence circulating online, but also because Nia's calm dignity had won hearts across the globe. At home, her phone buzzed constantly. Messages of support poured in from strangers and loved ones alike. "Nia," her mother said one evening, sitting beside her at the kitchen table, "we're so proud of you. What you did. It takes courage most people don't have." Nia smiled, tiredly. "I just did what anyone should have done," she said. But it's exhausting. Everyone's watching. I try to focus on school and summer plans, but it's like I'm living in a fishbowl. Her father, always her rock, wrapped in Tio, arm around her shoulder. This is bigger than all of us. Your voice has opened a door. Sometimes the cost is hard, but change requires sacrifice. That night, unable to sleep, Naya sat at her desk and opened her journal. For months she had been piecing together the threads of stories she found in newspapers, online forums, and whispered conversations. Stories of casual dismissiveness, microaggressions, and outright discrimination disguised behind polite smiles and company policies. Her investigation, though informal and scattered, had switched from a private curiosity into a mission. The incident on Flight 274 was not isolated. It was a symptom, a glaring example of systemic issues too long ignored. She began drafting emails and messages, connecting with advocacy groups. Invitations came for interviews and panels. Suddenly, Nia was both an emblem and an activist, navigating the complex terrain of public attention. At school, reactions varied. Some peers showered her with admiration. Others whispered behind her back, uncomfortable with the spotlight she carried. Teachers offered support quietly, while some administrators nervously avoided mentioning her name. But for Nia, the pressure was not just external. Inside, she struggled with the weight of expectations, to be perfect, to be brave, to never falter. One afternoon, as she walked through the bustling halls, her phone chimed. It was a new message from an unknown number. "Keep going. We see you. You're not alone." A chill ran down her spine. She knew the road ahead would be arduous, filled with victories and setbacks. Still, deep inside, a flicker of hope burned bright. Weeks passed, leading to an official hearing at the airline's headquarters. Nia, accompanied by her parents and legal counsel, faced the panel that would decide the consequences for the flight attendant and mandated changes within the company. The flight attendant herself appeared, her face unreadable, avoidance in her eyes whenever they met Nia's steady gaze. One of the commissioners leaned in. "Ms. Johnson, your testimony was powerful and clear. We recognize the bravery you displayed." The airline pledged to overhaul their training programs, enforce stricter anti-discrimination policies, and create a new task force for diversity and inclusion. The flight attendant was terminated. As the hearing ended, reporters clamored for statements. Nia glanced at her parents. With a steady voice, she said, "This is just the beginning. True change takes more than words. It requires action, empathy, and listening." Later, when she was alone, she allowed herself a rare moment to breathe, the exhaustion pooling beneath her skin. Her phone buzzed again, this time a text from a girl she met online through the advocacy groups. "Your story gave me strength to speak up at my own school. Thank you." Nia smiled, realizing that her courage was not just hers anymore. It belonged to every voice silenced, every injustice ignored. The journey from that fateful flight would ripple far beyond the confines of one airplane seat, a flight grounded but a movement lifted. And as the sun rose the next day, Nia knew she would keep fighting, keep calling out for justice no matter the cost, because sometimes one voice, one call, can change the world. In the weeks following the airline hearing, Nia found herself navigating uncharted territory. One that stretched far beyond the boundaries of a single flight or even the confines of her hometown. The thrust into the spotlight was as exhilarating as it was overwhelming. Yet every step forward reminded her of the countless others whose stories remained unheard. Her phone buzzed incessantly with interview requests, invitations to speak at events, and calls from journalists. Her social media account swelled with followers both encouraging and critical. She knew this was only the first chapter of a long journey. At school, things had begun to settle. Teachers who were once distant now offered private support. Friends rallied around her, their loyalty unwavering. But for every hand extended in friendship, there were still whispers and sideways glances, the subtle reminders of the world's fragility. One afternoon, while preparing for a podcast interview, Nia sat with her mother in the quiet corner of their favorite cafe. "You've come so far," her mother said softly, stirring her tea. "But remember to take care of yourself." Nia nodded, a hint of weariness in her eyes. "Sometimes I wonder if any of this will really change anything, or if I'm just a tiny ripple in a vast ocean." Her mother smiled warmly. "Ripples become waves. It's the beginning that matters, Nia. The courage to stand up." Later that week, Nia met with a local community group dedicated to combating racial injustice. There, she spoke candidly about her experience, not just the incident on the plane, but the systemic issues woven throughout her life and many others. The room was filled with nods, tears, and determined faces. Together, they plotted ways to advance education, inclusion, and policy reform at a local and statewide level. One warm evening, as golden light spilled across her room, Nia sat at her desk reviewing messages from young people inspired by her story. They shared their own challenges and victories, hoping for guidance. It was then that Nia realized her calling was clear: to be a beacon for those silenced, to bridge gaps forged by fear and misunderstanding. But the road wasn't without its shadows. The flight attendant's allies launched a social media campaign to discredit Nia, attempting to paint her as dishonest or disruptive. The hateful emails and messages found their way into Nia's inbox like a relentless tide. Her father noticed her growing anxiety and sat beside her one evening. "Remember, hate is noise you don't have to listen to. Your truth is stronger." One morning, a surprise arrived, a package containing a letter from a renowned civil rights activist. The letter praised Nia's bravery and encouraged her to keep pushing the boundaries. With renewed vigor, Nia began speaking at schools and universities, her words resonating with scores of young activists. Invitations poured in from distant cities and countries. Despite the whirlwind, she remained grounded by the knowledge that change demanded persistence, even when the pace was slow and the opposition fierce. Months later, a documentary crew arrived to film her journey, capturing both the harrowing moments on the flight and the aftermath that rippled far beyond the clouds. Under the bright studio lights, Nia shared the core of her message. Justice isn't a destination. It's a constant, relentless pursuit fueled by each and every one of us. The documentary aired to critical acclaim, sparking new dialogues in communities across the nation. Nia's story became a catalyst for legislative hearings focused on anti-discrimination policies in the airline industry and beyond. Back home, in the quiet moments between activism and her teenage life, Nia found solace in simple pleasures: i.e., walk in the park, a call with a close friend, the smell of rain on pavement. She often reflected on that pivotal flight, the call that grounded a plane and awakened a movement. It had been terrifying and empowering all at once. Now, standing at the intersection of youth and leadership, Nia realized her voice was not just a reaction to hostility, it was a force capable of shaping the future. As dawn broke over the city skyline, Nia looked ahead with fierce hope. The journey was far from over, but she was ready. Because sometimes, one call doesn't just ground a plane, it lifts an entire generation. The whirlwind surrounding Nia's story hadn't slowed. If anything, the momentum only grew. Every new day brought fresh voices amplifying her message, yet with it came new challenges too. One afternoon, amid the flurry of preparing for a community panel, Nia received a message notification. It was from an unfamiliar number, a simple text that read, "Can we talk? I want to help." Curiosity mingled with caution. She hesitated but responded. The reply was almost immediate. "I'm part of the airline staff. I've witnessed things you haven't. I want to see change too." They arranged a discreet meeting at a small cafe downtown. When Nia arrived, a man waiting at a corner table stood. His name was Marcus, a veteran airline employee with over a decade's experience. He looked wary but earnest as he spoke. "What happened to you on Flight 274 wasn't an isolated incident," he admitted. "There's a culture that needs to change, from the top down." Nia listened carefully as Marcus shared stories of subtle biases, microaggressions, and systemic issues within the airline industry. Things the public rarely saw. The company talks a good game about inclusion, Marcus said quietly, but unless those policies are enforced and embraced, it's just lip service. Nia felt a spark of hope. Here was someone inside, willing to challenge the status quo alongside her. They formed a plan to gather employee testimonies and push for internal reforms. The goal was clear: change not just for the passengers facing discrimination, but for staff, trapped in a system resistant to progress. As the weeks passed, Nia and Marcus worked together to prepare a comprehensive report detailing the pervasive issues. They coordinated meetings with airline executives and presented undeniable evidence of the gaps between policy and practice. Their collaboration also helped humanize the issues for those skeptical or distant from these realities. Meanwhile, Nia found surprising strength in this alliance. Sharing the burden with someone who understood the intricacies of the airline world gave her renewed energy. But the road was frustratingly slow. Resistance emerged from some quarters, employees fearful of speaking out, leadership reluctant to admit fault. One evening, after a particularly tense meeting, Marcus confessed, "Sometimes I worry we're just pushing against an immovable wall." Nia smiled softly. "Movable or not, walls don't last forever. We're chipping away. That's what matters." Then came a breakthrough. The airline announced a partnership with independent civil rights organizations to overhaul its training protocols and improve accountability. Nia was invited to serve on a newly created advisory board representing passengers and activists. It was a formal recognition of the impact her voice had had, not just on that one flight, but on the culture surrounding it. Her days became a blend of advocacy, public appearances, and studying for college entrance exams, a balancing act both exhilarating and exhausting. Through it all, Nia drew strength from her family's unwavering support and the growing community rallying behind her. One humid summer night, as she walked home beneath the street lamps, Nia thought back to that moment atop the plane, the voice that had shouted at her, the call that had grounded the aircraft. What started as a moment of humiliation had blossomed into a movement. Change was slow, imperfect, and challenging, but it was happening. And sometimes the most unlikely allies could change everything. Despite the progress made, the journey for Nia was far from over. The glare of public attention was relentless. Every new initiative, every speech, and even her quiet moments away from the spotlight were scrutinized intensely. The higher she climbed, the more visible and vulnerable she became. One morning, as she scrolled through her phone, Nia noticed a flood of new comments and messages, many supportive, but some dripping with venom. Hate mail had become a daily occurrence, threats, slurs, and attempts to discredit her. Her mother, who had been her steadfast protector, sat beside her when Nia confessed the toll it was taking. "It's wearing me down," Nia said softly, eyes heavy. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough for this." Her mother took her hand firmly. "You are stronger than you realize. Remember, the storm is a sign that what you've done matters." At school, things were growing more complicated. Nia's presence sparked divisiveness. While many classmates admired her courage, a vocal minority spread rumors and questioned her motives. Some teachers privately acknowledged her strength, but avoided addressing the controversy openly. Her father advised patience. "Change is never easy, especially when it threatens old assumptions. Stand firm, keep your heart open." Yet the emotional weight pulled at Nia day after day. At a national conference on racial equity, Nia faced an entirely different kind of challenge. Invited to speak alongside seasoned activists and professionals, she felt both honored and overwhelmed. As she stepped onto the stage, nerves gnawed at her, but the audience's warm applause steadied her. She shared her story, the moments on the plane, the call that changed everything, the ongoing fight for justice. Her words resonated deeply, sparking conversation long after the session ended. Backstage, a woman approached her. "Your story gave me hope," she said, "but also reminded me of how much work remains." Nia nodded, knowing the truth in those words. One evening, exhaustion overtook her. She collapsed on the couch at home, scrolling through comments and reflecting on how much had changed and how much remained broken. Suddenly, her phone rang, a familiar number. "It's Marcus," she said softly. He had news. After months of persistent pressure, the airline had announced a new task force dedicated to systemic equity, with commitments to regular public reporting and transparent disciplinary processes. Naya smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "This is real," she whispered. "We're making a difference." But the fight was far from done. The flight attendants' allies had launched legal actions against the airline and Naya herself, alleging defamation and questioning the validity of the incident. The lawsuit loomed like a shadow, threatening to drain resources and energy. Through it all, Nia found strength in community support, legal counsel, and her family's love. Her voice remained steady in interviews and courtrooms alike, grounded by her conviction that truth and justice would prevail. One quiet night, she journaled. "The storm is fierce, but it cannot break me. I stand for every voice silenced. This is not just my fight, it's ours." And as dawn broke, Nia readied herself again, for whatever lay ahead. Because sometimes, when a plane is grounded by a single call, the journey toward justice just takes flight. The courtroom was packed, its walls echoing with whispered conversations and shutter clicks as news photographers documented the unfolding saga. Nia sat beside her parents and legal team, the weight of the defamation lawsuit pressing upon her like a physical force, but she refused to let it break her spirit. The flight attendants' legal counsel argued that the airline had acted hastily, that Nia's story was exaggerated and damaging to the employee's reputation. They painted a picture of a misunderstanding blown out of proportion, but Nia's attorney was prepared. They presented a trove of evidence, video footage, witness testimonies, and the recorded call that had sparked the grounding of Flight 274. As the trial unfolded over weeks, community rallies gathered outside the courthouse. Hundreds stood in solidarity, holding signs proclaiming messages of justice, equality, and resilience. The Cause Stand With Nia movement had grown into a nationwide call for systemic reform. Inside the courtroom, Nia found unexpected allies. Former airline staff testified about the subtle bias and hostile environments many faced. Experts spoke on the psychological impact of microaggressions. Each voice layered strength upon strength, weaving a tapestry impossible to ignore. Yet the strain was undeniable. Late nights reviewing documents, endless interviews, and the emotional toll weighed heavily. Nia's family remained her anchor, reminding her of why she fought, not for fame, but for change. One day, a fellow plaintiff, a young woman sharing her story of discrimination on another airline, approached Nia. "Your courage has helped me find mine," she said quietly. Together, they began promoting a coalition of voices united against injustice in travel industries. The hearing became more than a legal battle. It was a movement, a reckoning. Finally, the judge delivered the verdict. The defamation claims against Nia were dismissed. The airline was mandated to pay fines and implement rigorous oversight policies. Outside the courthouse, cheers erupted. Nia lifted her face to the sky, tears merging with smiles. But amidst the triumph, she knew the battle extended beyond legal victories. She spoke at a press conference later that day, her voice resolute. "This is not the end. It's a reminder that justice requires vigilance and courage." The journey ahead was still long, but Nia's story had become a beacon, navigating a path toward a world where no passenger, or person, is made to feel less because of who they are. Surrounded by supporters, her family, and newfound friends, Nia felt a deep sense of purpose. She sat down that night and began drafting letters to policymakers, urging them to embrace comprehensive protections against discrimination in public spaces. In her heart, she carried the hope that one call, a single voice, could indeed resound across an entire nation. Because sometimes, a grounded plane is only the beginning of a flight toward true change. Months after the courtroom victory, Nia sat in the cozy corner of her favorite bookstore, a quiet refuge amidst the whirlwind of advocacy and visibility. She thumbed through a worn copy of a civil rights anthology, feeling the weight of history mingling with the pressing urgency of the present. Her story had become a catalyst, one that rippled beyond airline aisles into boardrooms, legislatures, and classrooms. Invitations to speak around the country poured in, each an opportunity to share the message she carried. Dignity, respect, and justice are not privileges, they are rights. The days were long, packed with meetings, interviews, and planning sessions. Yet in quiet moments, Nia found solace in writing. Letters to younger activists, essays for publications, and notes for a memoir she had only recently begun. Her family remained the bedrock of her strength. Her father's quiet counsel, her mother's unwavering belief, and Jake's lighthearted jokes reminded her of the simple joys sustaining her courage. One spring morning, Nia received an unexpected message from the airline's new CEO. He wanted to meet, not for formalities, but to discuss the next phase of their transformation. The meeting was civil, even hopeful. The CEO acknowledged the airline's past failures and outlined ambitious plans. New training programs designed with activists' input, greater transparency in complaints processes, and a commitment to fostering inclusive company culture. Nia raised tough questions, refusing to let words become hollow promises. But beneath the formality, she sensed a genuine intent to change. Her work with the airline evolved into a partnership focused on accountability and education, not just about avoiding harm, but about actively uplifting marginalized voices. Simultaneously, Nia's reach expanded through collaborations with civil rights organizations, youth empowerment groups, and educational initiatives. She visited schools, hosted workshops, and mentored young leaders learning to wield their own voices. Yet she knew the path was not without obstacles. Systemic change is slow, stubborn. For every step forward, there were setbacks, moments of backlash, policy gridlocks, or public indifference. But Nia's calling was clear. Her experience on Flight 274 had become a symbol of resistance, resilience, and the power of one determined voice. One afternoon, while walking through a bustling city park, Nia overheard a group of teenagers debating a recent social justice campaign. Smiling quietly, she realized her story was no longer just hers. It belonged to a generation rising to demand more equity and inclusion. Her phone buzzed, a message from a young activist thanking her for inspiring courage in the face of adversity. Nia paused beneath a blooming tree, sunlight filtering through the leaves. She reflected on the journey, from the shouts in the cramped airplane cabin to headlines, courtrooms, and community halls. A quiet certainty settled within her. Change endures because ordinary people choose to speak out, to act, to persist. As evening drew near, Nia sat at her desk and composed a new message. A call to action for a nationwide coalition advocating for equitable treatment in travel and public spaces. Her voice, once a single call grounding a plane, had become a chorus, reverberating beyond horizons and generations. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary journeys begin with one moment, one choice, and the courage to say, enough. The momentum that Nia had helped ignite spread far beyond transportation and airline cabins. Her story became a beacon in countless communities, sparking dialogues about respect, equity, and empowerment in unexpected places. Schools, workplaces, even local governments began hosting forums inspired by her courage and the conversations she had helped foster. One crisp autumn morning, Nia stood before a diverse crowd in a packed auditorium. Students, activists, community leaders, and everyday citizens filled the seats, their faces glowing with anticipation. This event wasn't just a speech. It was the launch of a nationwide campaign she had been helping to organize. Voices Unite, a coalition advocating for systemic change across industries plagued by racial bias. Her message was straightforward, but powerful. Justice begins when we listen, and our strength grows when we stand together. The evening was alive with passionate discussions and plans for tangible action. Grassroots groups registered support, while elected officials voiced commitment to legislative reform. Nia's vision of empowering individuals to hold institutions accountable was gaining traction. But amid the optimism, Nia never forgot the complexity of the struggle. Long-standing systems of discrimination don't yield easily, and her journey had already shown her how personal and public battles intertwined. Back home, she often reflected on the day the plane was grounded, how a single call had exposed a fault line in an industry and rippled outward into something greater than she'd imagined. Her family's support remained constant, though life had shifted irreversibly. Nia's brother Jake had taken up advocacy, in his own way, organizing local youth events focused on civil rights education. Meanwhile, Nia's academic ambitions flourished. She was accepted into a prestigious university, where she planned to study social justice and public policy, eager to build the knowledge to complement her lived experience. One afternoon, Nia received an invitation to speak at the United Nations. During the annual International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, it was an honor that underscored the global resonance of her story. As she prepared her speech, Nia contemplated the power of stories, how one voice, once silenced, could awaken collective conscience. She wrote, "No one should have to make that difficult call like I did. To be treated with dignity should not be an exception but a universal right." The day of the speech arrived. Standing at the podium, the eyes and ears of the world on her, Nia's heart steadied. Her voice carried clarity and urgency as she shared her experience and called for united action. The standing ovation that followed was more than applause. It was a declaration that the fight she had joined was shared by many. Yet Nia knew awareness was a beginning, not the end. She and her allies recommitted themselves to the work ahead, addressing policy, educating youth, and confronting bias wherever it flourished. Months later, legislative bills inspired by Voices Unite were debated in parliaments and congresses, demanding transparency, accountability, and equality. Nia's story continued to shine as a guiding light, a reminder that progress is slow but possible when courage meets community. In quiet moments beneath starlit skies, Nia dreamed of a future where no teenager would fear being made to feel invisible in a seat meant for them. And though the path was long, with horizon unending, she walked forward with conviction. For she had learned something fundamental, that from one call, one stand, one voice, comes a force that can change the world. Time had a way of flowing differently since that day aboard Flight 274, the day that changed Nia's life and, in some small way, the world around her. The echoes of her story rippled far beyond her initial call, inspiring movements, altering policies, and opening eyes. But for Nia, the journey was more personal than public. One quiet morning, while sitting at a cafe with her mother and father, Nia finally allowed herself to breathe. "I don't think I ever truly stopped to ask," she said thoughtfully, "what I want beyond all this." Her mother smiled gently. "That's important. You've been so focused on what needed to be done for others, but you deserve happiness too." Nia nodded, her eyes reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and hope. She had found strength in activism, but also a yearning for ordinary moments, laughter with friends, quiet nights, dreams unshadowed by struggle. In the coming months, she took deliberate steps to balance her activism with her personal life. She reconnected with hobbies she'd neglected, painting, reading fiction, even dancing with friends under city lights. College began as a whirlwind, a new world where ideas met diverse perspectives. Nia's studies opened doors to understanding complex societal dynamics. She harnessed academic knowledge to deepen her advocacy. One evening, after a particularly engaging seminar on social movements, Nia spoke with a professor who had spent decades fighting for civil rights. "Your story holds power," he said kindly, "but remember, it's the movement, not the moment, that changes history." Nia reflected on those words often. They reminded her that her individual journey was part of a greater tapestry woven by countless voices over generations. Community work remained central. Nia started mentoring younger activists, helping them find their voices and channels for change. Her collaboration with Marcus continued, and together, they launched an initiative to train airline staff and managers, on cultural competency and empathy. Meanwhile, Nia's family watched with pride as she blossomed into a leader grounded in humility. Yet moments of doubt still surfaced, questions about progress, fairness, and the challenges yet to come. During a winter night, bundled beneath a cozy blanket, Nia journaled, "The road is long and sometimes lonely, but every step forward is a step toward a world where everyone belongs." As flowers bloomed with spring, Nia addressed a gathering of students at her alma mater, urging them to embrace responsibility and compassion. Her words resonated, planting seeds of change in a new generation. That night, beneath a moonlit sky, Nia embraced the future, uncertain, powerful, and full of possibility. She was no longer just the girl who had been shouted at on a plane. She was a symbol of resilience, a catalyst for justice, and a reminder that one voice, one call, can indeed change the course of history. Because sometimes, the true journey begins only after the plane has landed. Flight attendant shouts at a black teen girl. Then she makes one call, and the plane is grounded. Part 13. Legacy of a voice. As the years unfolded, Nia's story settled into the fabric of a movement, a testament to the power of standing tall against injustice. The small girl who had faced humiliation on a flight had matured into an inspiring leader whose ripple of courage ignited change beyond what she had imagined. Her college years were marked by challenges and triumphs alike. She immersed herself in studies of law, social justice, and communication, tools she knew were essential to transforming society. Late nights engaged in debate, research, and advocacy shaped her intellect and sharpened her resolve. Her activism expanded to global platforms, collaborating with international organizations, championing human rights and equality. The United Nations invitation deepened her understanding of diversity's vast spectrum and the shared struggles faced worldwide. Back home, foundations were laid for scholarships supporting young people of color pursuing higher education. Programs inspired by her story funded mentorships, leadership training, and community development, a tangible legacy stirring hope. Despite the acclaim and responsibility, Nia remained grounded. She often returned to the small cafe where she first met Marcus, sharing stories, laughter, and dreams for a better future. Marcus, too, had grown from an insider observer to a formidable change agent within the airline industry. His courageous whistleblowing inspired internal reforms that became models for other corporations seeking equitable transformation. One afternoon, as they reviewed plans for a nationwide equity summit, Nia smiled. "Sometimes I wonder if it all started with a simple phone call." Marcus nodded. "Sometimes that's all it takes. One voice willing to be heard." Nia cherished those quiet reflections. She knew that transformation was neither linear nor easy, but rather an ongoing collective effort, kindled by individual acts of courage. In mentorship sessions with young activists, Nia emphasized the importance of resilience, of finding strength amid adversity. "Your voice matters," she would say. "Use it wisely and loudly." On the anniversary of the flight incident, Nia organized a community event celebrating stories of courage from diverse backgrounds. The gathering was a vibrant mosaic, poetry, music, and personal testimonies weaving a tapestry of hope, healing, and determination. It was a reminder that progress is built not just in courtrooms or offices, but in everyday acts of listening, speaking, and standing. Nia's journey was a testament to the power of one call, a spark that grounded a plane, awakened a nation, and illuminated the path ahead for generations to come. As twilight bathed the city skyline, Nia reflected on the circles of impact her life had created. Her story was proof that when one voice refuses to be silenced, it becomes a chorus echoing across time. And sometimes, that chorus changes everything. Years passed like chapters in a book, each one revealing layers of growth, challenge, and unexpected possibility. Nia stood at the intersection of history and hope, a living testament to the enduring power of resilience. Her work continued to transcend boundaries, joining hands, with activists, educators, policymakers, and ordinary citizens united by the vision of a fairer world. Her story was taught in schools, a case study in courage and civic responsibility. But despite accolades and global recognition, Nia remained rooted in the simple truths she'd learned along the way. That meaningful change begins within communities, that listening is as vital as speaking, and that every voice carries weight. One cool spring morning, Nia found herself preparing for a keynote address at a renowned university. As she reviewed her notes, a wave of calm settled over her, part gratitude, part anticipation. She spoke passionately about the incident that had become her catalyst, the moment she had been shouted at for claiming a seat she'd paid for, the call that grounded a plane, and the path that followed. Her message resonated, that systemic bias persists, but it can be dismantled through courage, advocacy, and unity. The audience, students, faculty, activists, responded with thoughtful questions and discussions that extended far beyond the lecture hall. Afterward, Nia wandered the campus, absorbing the energy of curiosity and hope swirling around her. She thought back to the conversations she'd had with Marcus, her mentor and unexpected ally from the airline. Together, they had navigated the complexities of institutional reforms, crafted training programs, and held leaders accountable. Their partnership was a model of change forged through trust and shared vision. Later that evening, Nia sat beneath the stars, reflecting on the journey. Life had transformed beyond what she could once imagine. A small call blossomed into waves of change that reached corners of the world she'd never seen. Yet she knew the work remained unfinished. Rising generations looked to her example, eager to continue the fight for dignity and equality. And she was ready, energized by the belief that each voice, each choice, mattered immensely. Nia smiled softly, eyes on the horizon. Because sometimes, the journey that begins with one call does not end with a landing. It unfolds into a lifetime of impact, courage, and hope. Years after that fateful flight, Nia stood at the edge of a packed auditorium in her hometown. The air buzzed with anticipation, the room filled with friends, family, students, community leaders, and even some familiar faces from her journey. Tonight was a celebration, not just of her story, but of the collective progress sparked by a single brave stand. As she approached the podium, she felt the weight of every challenge, triumph, and lesson carried with her. The whispers of doubt and voices of support had shaped the person she'd become. "I never imagined," she began, her voice steady and warm, "that one call, one moment would lead to this. But standing here tonight, surrounded by so many who have walked alongside me, I am reminded that change is never the work of one person, it is the work of all of us." Applause filled the room. Nia scanned the crowd and caught the eyes of Marcus, her steadfast ally, who gave her an encouraging nod. She spoke of the ongoing journey, the victories and setbacks, the importance of resilience, empathy, and community. She shared stories of young activists she'd met along the way, their voices joining a chorus louder and stronger than ever. "Remember," she urged, "that every voice matters, and sometimes the smallest act of courage can spark a movement." After the event, she mingled with attendees, exchanging stories and smiles that radiated hope. Later, in quiet reflection, Nia paused to write in her journal, "From a single call to a chorus raised, this journey has been beyond what I could have imagined. The future belongs to those who rise, who speak, who plan for a world where justice is not deferred." In the days that followed, Nia received messages from around the world, letters from teenagers inspired to stand against injustice, invitations to collaborate, and expressions of gratitude. Her work was far from over. New challenges awaited, but the foundation was strong. As she boarded a plane to her next engagement, a gentle smile touched her lips. She settled into her seat, reaching for her phone. And as the engines roared to life, Nia knew that her story, like the vast sky beyond the window, was boundless. Because sometimes one call grounds a plane and sets an entire world in motion. The hum of the airplane engines was a familiar comfort to Nia as she settled into her seat, the soft recline cushioning her tired frame. This flight was different, not an ordinary journey, but the beginning of another chapter in her relentless pursuit of justice and equity. Months had passed since the celebratory event in her hometown, but the fire within her burned brighter than ever. Invitations to speak, collaborate, and inspire had taken her to cities across the country, and now beyond its borders. Her story had blossomed into a global narrative of courage, resilience, and systemic change. As the plane soared above the clouds, Nia reflected on how far she'd come, from the moment she was shouted at in that first-class seat, to grounding a plane with a single call, and now to standing on international stages urging collective action. Her phone buzzed, a message from an emerging activist group in Southeast Asia, eager to implement workshops inspired by her experiences. A soft smile played on her lips. Each message, each connection, was a thread weaving an expansive tapestry of global solidarity. But the journey hadn't been without its shadows. The constant scrutiny and demands had drained her at times. The weight of expectations, the persistent battle against systemic inertia, and the occasional sting of doubt tested her resolve. Yet, each challenge only deepened her commitment. She was driven not by accolades, but by a vision, one where no young person would endure discrimination or feel voiceless in their rightful place. A gentle tap on her shoulder broke her reverie. A flight attendant with a warm smile leaned in. "Ms. Johnson, we appreciate your advocacy. This airline has implemented many of the changes you championed." Nia nodded appreciatively, the gesture a quiet acknowledgement of progress. As the plane began its descent, she prepared for the next engagement, a conference uniting global leaders to discuss equity in travel and public services. Upon landing, the vibrant city welcomed her with open arms. The conference hall buzzed with languages and cultures, unified by a shared mission. Nia's keynote was met with standing ovations, her message transcending borders and backgrounds. Throughout the days that followed, she engaged in dialogues and workshops, learning as much as leading. She met others whose stories echoed hers, their collective voices forging a symphony of change. One evening, walking along a bustling street illuminated by lanterns, Nia realized the journey was infinite, each step forward opening doors to new horizons. Back in her hotel room, she penned in her journal. "The world is vast and complex, but so is our capacity for empathy, justice, and unity. Together we will continue to fly higher, beyond ceilings, beyond limits." With renewed energy, Nia looked toward the horizon. The skies were wide, and her journey was just beginning. Because sometimes one voice can launch a flight that transforms the world. The glow of dawn filtered softly through the window of Nia's apartment. Sitting by her desk, she stared blankly at the lit screen before her. The weight of the world seemed to press heavier today, even after years of advocacy, speeches, and reform. The call that had grounded a plane so long ago felt both distant and immediate, a reminder of the long road still ahead. Her phone vibrated with a notification, a message from a young activist seeking guidance. Nia smiled faintly. Despite the exhaustion clawing at her, the chance to inspire another still fueled her spirit. Outside, city sounds stirred, a symphony of life humming with possibility. The late spring air carried a subtle promise of change, but beneath it lay the calls for reckoning and justice that still demanded attention. For all the victories, the undeniable truth persisted. Systemic bias and inequality were entrenched beyond a single airline or courtroom. They were woven into institutions, communities, and even individual hearts and minds. Nia recognized the crossroads she had reached, not of ending, but of direction. What would her voice call for next? How would she ensure the stories of others were elevated, not overshadowed? How could she foster unity without glossing over real and raw differences? That afternoon, at a round table convened by international human rights groups, these questions filled the room. Diverse voices engaged respectfully yet passionately. Nia listened and spoke, seeking balance between bold advocacy and collaborative healing. She recalled that first flight, the shouts cutting through the cabin, the solitary phone call that grounded not only an airplane but stirred a movement. How fragile that one moment had seemed, and how powerful it had become. A colleague raised a difficult point. Change requires discomfort. We must be willing to confront uncomfortable truths and hear voices we don't always agree with. Churcha nodded. And courage doesn't always look like loud protests. Sometimes it's the quiet persistence of daily work, of teaching, of listening. That evening, as stars blinked above, she returned home humbled but hopeful. She realized that her journey was now also about fostering inclusive spaces where every voice could be heard without fear. She tucked away old newspaper clippings and court documents, artifacts of a battle fought and still unfolding. She drafted plans for new initiatives prioritizing youth education, empathy training, and cross-cultural dialogues. Even as she rested, her thoughts multiplied, dreams of a world where no teenager feared being shoved from a seat they'd earned, where one call was no longer needed because respect was universal. Naya closed her eyes, breathing deeply. The road ahead was uncharted, but her footsteps would continue with unwavering purpose. For she understood now more than ever that one call was only the beginning of a flight toward justice that would never truly end. The sun dipped low over the city skyline, casting long shadows across the streets where Nia often walked after long days filled with meetings and speeches. Despite the progress achieved, she sometimes found herself wrestling with fatigue, not just physical but emotional, the weight of expectations, the burden of constant vigilance. One evening as she ambled through a quiet park, her phone buzzed with a video message from a teenager halfway across the globe. The young girl's voice trembled as she spoke about facing discrimination on a recent flight, but finding strength in Nia's story. "We're not alone," Nia whispered as she watched, feeling a spark rekindle within her tired heart. That moment reminded her why the fight mattered, because every story connected like threads in a vast tapestry of resilience and hope. Returning home, Nia sat before her desk, piled with letters, articles, and plans. She knew the landscape of equality was complex and ever-changing, but the flicker of possibility kept her burning bright. Her parents' words echoed, a reminder to nurture herself alongside nurturing others. That evening, Nia took time to meditate and reconnect with her own dreams beyond activism. Writing poetry she'd tucked away, morning runs beneath the changing seasons, moments of quiet laughter with friends. She acknowledged that sustaining change required grounding, a balance between courage and care. Weeks later, Nia met with community leaders to launch a fellowship program aimed at empowering young people from marginalized backgrounds to voice their stories, advocate for change, and cultivate leadership. The initiative emphasized healing alongside activism because, sometimes, the path forward includes mending the wounds inflicted by systemic neglect and bias. Nia's public appearances grew fewer, replaced by deeper grassroots engagements and mentorship. She treasured these connections, the raw honesty, the shared dreams, the unyielding spirit of youth eager to rise. At a quiet cafe, Marcus joined her for a candid conversation. "You've come so far," he said, eyes reflecting pride. "And you're still standing tall," Nia smiled softly, "because I'm not standing alone anymore." Together, they planned more expansive workshops designed to challenge unconscious biases and promote empathy within industries far beyond airlines. Their partnership was a beacon, illustrating that change could come when unexpected allies joined forces. On a chilly winter morning, standing before a group of young leaders, Nia's voice rang clear. "Our stories are the light that breaks through darkness. Let that light guide your path." The applause was thunderous but fleeting. The real work was ongoing and unrelenting. As night fell, Nia penned in her journal. The journey stretches infinitely. Each voice, each step, kindles new flames of hope. Sometimes the darkest skies reveal the brightest stars. Her story, born from one call that grounded a plane, had become a lantern carried forward, illuminating not just her path, but countless others. And as she looked to the horizon, she knew the flight toward justice and dignity would never truly land. The world was shifting beneath Nia's feet, subtle but undeniable. Changes she had once only dreamed of were beginning to take root. Policies rewritten, attitudes challenged, communities engaged in honest dialogue. Nia traveled extensively, witnessing the vast diversity of experiences, yet bound by common threads of struggle and hope. From bustling urban centers to remote villages, her message echoed, "Dignity belongs to all." Yet with growth came resistance. Opponents of change wielded harsh rhetoric, weaponized misinformation, and sought to undermine the very movement she embodied. The courtroom battles, the public debates, the social media storms, it all demanded resilience fueled by purpose. One chilly morning, Nia arrived at a civil rights conference renowned for bridging cultures and ideas. She was greeted warmly by attendees eager for insight and inspiration. On stage, her speech wove personal narrative with universal calls to action. She spoke not just for herself, but for millions whose voices remained unheard. "Injustice thrives in silence," she declared. "Our strength lies in speaking, listening, and acting together." Her words resonated deeply, sparking conversations that stretched long into the night. Backstage, Nia met with fellow activists formulating strategies to safeguard gains while accelerating progress. "It's not just about dismantling barriers," a colleague noted. "It's about building bridges." Nia nodded. "And each bridge begins with trust, earned through understanding and courage." The days that followed involved workshops, planning sessions, and personal reflections. Nia found solace in mentoring youth, their eager questions reminding her of the importance of nurturing new leaders. She often thought back to that transformative flight, the moment her voice haltingly refused to be silenced, and a plane was grounded. Now, her influence soared beyond aviaries, touching schools, boardrooms, legislatures, and homes worldwide. Despite setbacks, Nia believed firmly in the promise of gradual but genuine progress, an evolution rooted in empathy and steadfastness. On a brisk autumn evening, sitting by a fire with close friends and family, Nia shared her hopes. "Change is a tide," she said softly. "Sometimes it recedes, but it always returns stronger." Her mother smiled knowingly, "And you helped push it forward." As night deepened and stars blanketed the sky, Nia felt a profound peace. The journey was hard and far from over, but she and countless others were the winds of change pushing toward a brighter horizon. Years had passed since the fateful day on Flight 274, the day that transformed a single moment of injustice into a beacon of hope for countless individuals around the world. Nia's journey had become synonymous with courage, resilience, and relentless advocacy. From the pulpit of international forums to the classrooms of community centers, her voice echoed, inspiring generations to confront inequity and dare to dream of a fairer world. On this particular morning, Nia stood in a sunlit auditorium filled with bright-eyed students eager to learn about social justice and the power of speaking up. She began, "It was just an ordinary flight until a moment that changed everything." But it wasn't just about a seat. It was about standing for dignity, respect, and the right to be seen. The room's energy surged with anticipation. Students listened intently, their eyes reflecting hope and determination. After the talk, a young girl approached Nia, clutching a notebook filled with questions and sketches inspired by the story. "Thank you," she whispered. "You showed me it's okay to speak out." Nia smiled warmly. "Your voice is powerful. Use it wisely." Later, surrounded by loved ones and fellow activists, Nia reflected on the legacy forged through trials, triumphs, and unwavering commitment. Her efforts had sparked policy reforms, educational initiatives, and cultural shifts that resonated across industries and borders. Yet she remained humble, knowing the work of justice was ongoing, an unending flight toward equity. In moments of quiet reflection, Nia penned letters to emerging leaders, hoping to nurture the flame of activism. As twilight settled over the city skyline, she gazed toward the horizon with quiet pride. Because sometimes, a single call that grounds a plane can become the voice that lifts a generation. The sun peeked over the horizon, bathing the city in hues of gold and rose. Nia stood at the window of her new office, overlooking the bustling streets below. Here, miles from the cramped airplane seat where her story began, she recognized how much she had grown, and how far the echoes of that moment had traveled. Her journey had unfolded into a relentless pursuit of justice, education, and empowerment. The offices buzzed with staff from around the world, young leaders she mentored, passionate and driven. Together they pushed forward initiatives aimed at dismantling systemic inequities not just in travel, but in housing, education, employment, and healthcare. Naya's work had become a mosaic of advocacy, bridging gaps between communities and institutions. She often recalled that sharp voice on the plane, the sting of being singled out. But more importantly, the courage summoned in response. The courage to call out injustice, to refuse erasure. Her mornings began with messages from young people, seeking guidance, inspired by her example. Their resilience fueled her, a reminder of why the fight mattered. One day, she received an invitation to speak at a global summit on equality. The title was simple yet profound, The Power of One Voice. In the days leading up to the summit, Naya prepared diligently, weaving stories of individual strength with calls to collective action. As she stepped onto the stage, the auditorium held its breath, a tapestry of faces from numerous nations. Her words carried the rhythm of both poetry and purpose. One voice can tip the scales. One call can ground injustice. Together, our voices become an unbreakable chorus for change. The applause thundered as she concluded, a wave of affirmation, rippling through the crowd. Later, in conversations with fellow advocates, plans took shape for expanding global networks, sharing resources, and amplifying voices long silenced. Yet Nia never forgot the humble beginnings of her movement, the moment when a young girl refused to be dismissed, when a single call stopped a plane, and when a story became a revolution. That night, under a blanket of stars, she penned in her journal, "The sky is endless, endless like our resolve. The journey continues, each voice another step toward justice, each action a beacon for tomorrow." Nia smiled softly. The flight that began with a shout and a call had soared higher than she'd ever imagined, and the sky ahead held infinite possibilities. The crisp morning air carried a quiet promise as Nia stood on the steps of her alma mater, surrounded by friends, family, and a generation inspired by her journey. Today marked the launch of the Equality in Action Foundation, an organization birthed from years of struggle, resilience, and hope, a testament to one young girl's courage to speak up. Her mind drifted back to that tension-filled cabin on Flight 274 where a voice had shouted at her, questioning her right to occupy a seat she'd earned. The humiliation, the anger, the fear, each a weight she had carried, and yet each had carved pathways to change. "I never imagined a single call could have so much power," she whispered, smiling wistfully. The crowd hushed as she stepped to the podium, heart pounding but voice steady. "We gather here not to celebrate my story alone, but to honor all the voices that refuse to be silenced. Because justice is not the work of a moment, it is a movement, a lifetime commitment." Her speech unfolded organically, reflecting on challenges overcome, battles fought, and the collective hopes that fueled each step. This foundation is dedicated to empowering voices, especially those pushed to the margins, so that no one is made to feel invisible, unheard, or unworthy. Applause erupted, filling the hall like waves of possibility. Afterward, as Nia mingled with attendees, young activists eager to share their dreams, community leaders ready to make a difference, she felt a profound peace. The journey from that packed plane seat to this moment was a testament to grit, faith, and the unyielding power of a single voice. Later that evening, surrounded by family, Nia reflected on how the path had shaped her, not just as an advocate, but as a person. Her father smiled warmly. "You've turned struggle into strength. Your story will inspire generations." She nodded, grateful, yet aware that the fight for equality was ongoing. As twilight bathed the city, Nia sat by a window overlooking the stars, the same stars that had watched silently when she first took her stand. Above, the endless sky stretched vast and unbounded, A reminder that though this chapter was closing, the flight toward justice, dignity, and respect would continue. For sometimes one call doesn't just ground a plane, it elevates a movement, it lifts voices, and it opens horizons. Naya breathed deeply, ready for whatever came next. Because every ending is a new beginning. The end.